Hello, sinners and saints. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the latest episode of American Gods. We are on Season 1, Episode 5, Lemon Scented You, so spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be endeavoring to bear all in this review. This is going to be a spoiler-filled recap with my thoughts and analyses and reactions interwoven throughout. So I hope that you enjoy, and we have a crap ton of ground to cover, so I'm gonna get started right away. Now this episode, from my perspective, is arguably one of the show's densest and most ambitious outings yet. And by dense, I don't mean like dim-witted or stupid, but just that this episode was incredibly saturated with information in terms of the cinematography, the visuals, the dialogue. Oh, it was so rich. There is just a ton to unpack, way more than I can even be able to scratch the surface of in this review, but I'm gonna try anyway. So we are slowly starting to figure out the who and the why of the us versus them divide at the heart of the story. And Mr. Wednesday's enemies, the gods of today, tomorrow, and tomorrow's tomorrow, are in conflict among themselves, but nevertheless hope to quell the one brewing with Wednesday by blending their enterprises into something everlasting, a little alpha and omega action. But Wednesday is not one easily swayed. And he realizes, too, that, I mean, despite his fear, and this may very well be the first time that we've seen Mr. Wednesday afraid, he knows that he is gaining ground in this struggle. And despite the fact that Mr. World says there is no war, well, the very denial of it requires a recognition of what's going on. So I'm going to delve into that a bit later, but first and foremost, I want to quickly talk about the animated vignette that we got at the beginning of the episode. It was done with a really fascinating stop-motion-esque CG animation, which I found incredibly cool and mesmerizing to watch. And we basically get to see the sojourning tribe and the life and death of its god. And there's a quote from that opening story that really stuck with me. And it's that the gods are great, but people are greater, for it is in their hearts that gods are born, and to their hearts that they return. In the American Gods canon, divine entities live and die by the will of their disciples, and that is something that can be argued for in the real world too. And it's really interesting for viewers like myself. I am a Christian in my life, and that's what I believe and how I operate. And Christians, of course, believe that God was the one who created people in his likeness. So it's really interesting to explore and come to grips with that role reversal. I personally find it very enjoyable and compelling. But now we go back to the modern day. We see a fly make its home on Laura's skull as she awaits her still living husband. And soon enough, her puppy shows, though he's quick to make sure she isn't an illusion, the classic pillow test, if that can be described as a classic. And he says that they've got some unresolved issues to discuss, even though the wifey would rather they dwell on the miracle of her posthumous presence before confronting weightier matters. And Shadow, of course, craves the truth, and Laura does her best to give it. And she says it was a baker's year until she broke her promise to Shadow. And then says, you know what they say about grief, next to every cemetery is a hotel. And I can't say I've ever heard that one before, but anyway, Laura assures Shadow that she never intended to leave him for Robbie. She did give his two-timing a friend a goodbye blowjob, though, after which point she went, quote, somewhere and then into a box, but not for all that long, as we all know. So this version of Laura, like her counterpart in the novel, has also taken up post-mortem smoking. And Laura sees Shadow's radiant light when he steps outside to get cigarettes. Shadow is not alone, however, though his room is empty when he returns, and then he finds Laura in the bathtub where she's trying to immerse herself in a lifelike warmth. In the process of trying to downplay her corpse appeal, if you will, she's only putting her body in further jeopardy. And now's as good a time as any, of course, for Shadow to question the nature of her existence. That's pretty much who he is and what he does. And I guess it turns out that people don't just go to rot like she had originally thought. And I would say her thoughts about the afterlife are a bit more elastic now that she has essentially stretched the rules of mortality and pressed pause on the final judgment. So she's a lot more open-minded now. Still a bit of an asshole, but her vision has expanded. So a raven delivers an urgent message to Mr. Wednesday while Laura takes a futile drag on her cancer stick. Shadow is still shell-shocked, and he's now beginning to realize the scope of the storm that he sensed back in his final days as an inmate. The loss of Laura was a part of that tempest, one that's currently sweeping across the country as they speak. His mind is still struggling to keep up, but Laura has already wrapped her reanimated brain around the situation. The fact of the matter is that Shadow is still her puppy, but she now views him in a way that he can't even begin to fathom. So when Shadow and his wayward Frankenstein's bride finally do kiss, the rekindled intimacy registers as a heartbeat in Laura's chest, which is a cool moment. And sorry about that garage door opening, nothing I can do about that. But anyway, so they both get to experience her uncanny vitality in that moment. And then she later says, I don't really know much more than I did when I was alive. And I think whatever I know now that I didn't know then, I can't really put into words. But I do know that I love you. And she wants him to know that she's looking out for him and thanks him for the gift of Sweeney's coin, of course. And it's not really what was intended in the action, maybe, but it is what it is now. And Shadow can only really smile at that. You know, he knows Sweeney and what he's all about. And it's like, well, damn. But there's strain yet when he asserts that he is not Laura's puppy any longer. More on that later. So Mr. Wednesday shows up at Shadow's room, hoping to take him out for a drink or six, as a good friend does. And as Laura submerges herself in the bath, in a moment that echoes her past flirtations with death, but now sees her on the other side of the moral divide, we discover that the bank heist didn't exactly go according to plan. The quintessential red and blue lights blaze as Shadow and Wednesday are taken into custody. And Laura watches and feels Shadow's life force recede like a dying fire in this very kind of poignant moment. Now it's Technical Boy's turn to get pulled into the futuristic limo by the facehugger VR machine. And media, in the glorious form of Ziggy Stardust era David Bowie, lectures her fellow new god about his recent marketing blunder. And I gotta say, how spoiled are we to get Gillian Anderson as David Bowie and Marilyn Monroe in a single episode? I know that we only have 3 episodes left in the season, but still, it's freaking Christmas in May right now. And so what she says to Technical Boy is, you have an image problem. You need to think about your brand, how you want the world to see you, how you want Mr. World to see you. Got to put that designation in there. The higher-ups aren't exactly pleased with Technical Boy's antics, what with the whole hanging a black man from a tree thing. Anybody remember that? Doesn't reflect well on the company at the end of the day. And she says, you've got your transmission and your live wire, but your circuit's dead. And then these horizontal lines kind of cut through their conversation, which turns heated as Technical Boy gets defensive. But Shadow should not have been his target, and Mr. World demands an apology for Mr. Wednesday and Shadow. It must be authentic and seamless. And media says, Wednesday was suffocating, the spark was smoldering, then you came along putting out a fire with gasoline. Indeed, instead of putting the final nail in Wednesday's coffin, Technical Boy has stirred up a compelling controversy that could very well win Wednesday the backing of the masses. Technical Boy's pissed off that Wednesday's out collecting Pokemon and adding to his ranks, but media points out the error of his ways and says martyrdom is a popular recruitment tool, and now we have to pluck the fuse out of the fucker before the whole thing blows up in our faces. And Technical Boy calls the whole thing a delusion, an accusation that ends up granting us further insight into how media operates and why Mr. Wednesday poses an exigent threat to their operation. And interestingly, media seems to let it slip that she's an older god herself, one who, unlike Wednesday, has aligned herself with the new. And she says, mass delusions are as old as I am. I was there when the Martians invaded in 1938. What a panic. Powerful panic. Now there are starmen waiting in the sky. Little Ziggy Stardust reference there from the song Starman. And yeah, so the people believed it was true, and it was. And not everyone had to believe to conceive those celestials, though you know what they say, the truth is out there. But just enough believed to give life to the starmen, who were apparently going to meet in season 2, according to Brian Fuller. Very exciting stuff. So meanwhile, Wednesday and Shadow are being interrogated, and while Shadow tries to play things safe and lawyer up, as would any rational human being, Wednesday plays the part of the loony bin and cleverly unspools his master plan to actually throw off the detective. And he says, I was recruiting for, and I couldn't tell if he said tired or retired, but I'll just go with retired. I was recruiting a retired but still vital god of death into a war against the new gods, who very rightly fear him as much as they should fear me, but don't yet. And is he speaking of Chernobog or somebody else that we don't know? I don't know. So Shadow's detective has the sense that Wednesday's got some enemies in high places, judging by the perfectly packaged anonymous tip that led up to their arrest. And intricately detailed facts with GPS coordinates is enough to raise eyebrows and red flags, and I think this woman is smart, has a capable head on her shoulders. So she's hoping to get to the real bottom of things through this situation. Wednesday, of course, keeps spewing truth under the guise of utter nonsense, the old hiding in plain sight technique, while Shadow hopes that his compliance will present a pathway to freedom. Soon enough, he will be a free man, albeit on the run. It's not ideal, but hey, the ends justify the means, right? Not exactly, but... So, elsewhere, Sweeney makes landfall at Shadow's abandoned motel room and demands the return of his prized Lucky Charm. And he can see the coin lodged deep in Laura's throat when he confronts her, and it's glowing. And then she flicks the fuming leprechaun away and sends him hurtling against the wall. The gold is all hers now. She's not given up her life so easily, not since Shadow unwittingly restored it to her. Isn't her problem whether it was the right or wrong coin to begin with, you know? And each subsequent attempt that Sweeney makes to retrieve his, quote, stolen goods is violently rebuffed by the supernaturally inclined Laura, or superpowered, rather, who nonchalantly warns him that the last time she kicked a guy in the nuts, her foot wouldn't stop until it reached the dude's throat. I just gotta say, file that one away for the next time you're accosted by a creep at the bar, ladies, because this line could get you far. You could definitely take some cues from Miss Laura Moon in this situation. So, Sweeney tells Laura that Grimnir, the god who goes by Mr. Wednesday, arranged a fight between Sweeney and Shadow to test the mettle of his new recruit. And now here he is, begging for a coin he can't take, and screwed over by a god who can't be trusted. Postmortem Laura, of course, is also post-manners, and she doesn't give a shit about the leprechaun's desperate plight. They are quite an antagonistic and, dare I say, pugnacious pair, which is really funny because if you guys didn't know this already, Emily Browning has been cast to play a character from the original novel who is responsible for bringing Mad Sweeney to America. And I didn't hear if Pablo Schreiber is reprising his role in that case or if it's going to be a different character that's similar to him. But, you know, I just think that that's really, really funny, and I would love to see those two characters completely recontextualize in decades and centuries gone by. But, as things currently stand, Sweeney is uttering very sick and very real threats to the selfish Lady Lazarus, who's given him a literal run for his money. And he says the meat's gonna slide off you sooner or later, dead wife. Sooner if you keep soaking it in hot water. All that connective tissue that's holding you together, well, that's gonna liquefy. His astute medical opinion. She might want to get a second or third on that, but when the meat falls off her bones on a hot summer's day, he promises so romantically that he will reach up under her ribs and pluck the coin out of her like a ripe fruit. And he then makes a last-ditch effort to choke her out, just in time for the cops to burst in and apprehend him. I was wondering why they hadn't closed off the scene already, but hey, dramatically, narratively, still works. So he tries to insist that she was already dead. Such a watertight line of defense. I'm gonna say dead wife 1, leprechaun 0. Get your scorecards out because these two jackasses are not done clashing yet. The ginger minch and the dead wife have kicked off a hot-blooded rivalry, the likes of which pro wrestling could only dream of emulating on the screen, in my opinion. So Anansi the spider helps Wednesday get free from his handcuffs once he's with Shadow, who is still craving answers. And that's when none other than Marilyn Monroe with her billowing 7-year itch skirt comes floating in and breathily divulges her covered-up murder as this imaginary subway train passes underneath her. And she completes the iconic 7-year itch reference with, "Isn't that delicious?" And then she says, it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as a poor man. And Wednesday has relegated himself to a sort of poverty in the eyes of the new gods. His reach is limited in the modern world, although his roots do run deeper. And the new gods want to put an end to Wednesday's hand-to-mouth existence, which seems to threaten their own, and make him rich by broadcasting and commercializing his name and likeness, tapping into exciting, hot new markets like remote warfare. At any rate, in walks Mr. World, played to creepy, unnerving perfection by Crispin Glover, who makes a very memorable entrance. And he says he should have reached out ages ago, but he hadn't seen Wednesday. But in person, he is truly huge and unmissable. And I've got to say, Crispin Glover's Mr. World is way different from the Mr. World that I had imagined when I read the book, but to be fair, I actually had a tough time picturing that character. My conception of him was somewhat mutable, and he didn't even show up in full until much later in the book, so by then I didn't actually know what to think of him. But I think Fuller, Green, and the American Gods casting team have done an impeccable job of reifying some of the novel's strangest and most envelope-pushing characters, and I can already tell that Mr. World is one of their most impressive feats in that regard. Glover's Mr. World has this weird, tremulous tenor voice that seems to quiver with this thinly concealed ferocity, like it's a conscious effort for him to restrain himself, and it's freaky. He's a man of reason and rhyme who's occasionally overcome by his passion. Media kind of has to rein him in a bit. He is sinister and off-putting, a shady, all-knowing antagonist who's not exactly cool and collected, but is bent on having everything under control. So Wednesday tells Shadow not to respond to Mr. World, but he already knows everything. He knows people inside and out, from Shadow's blood type to his recurring nightmare, to his orgasm face, to his mother's sexual history. Shadow's everything has been recorded and stored and laid bare, and can and will be used against him. And after bursting at the seams with this coded information, Mr. World collects himself and then with a whistle summons the gap-toothed technical boy, who comes in with his tail between his legs and claims he's sorry for the insensitive lynching incident. It was, quote, in very poor taste, and far be it from him to add to the climate of hatred in America. And I would say feigning authenticity isn't exactly Technical Boy's strong suit. This is all about damage control. It's not about making reparations or resolving social ills. He's only sorry to have made a martyr out of Wednesday's ally, a mistake he'll not make twice, and for which he loses 2 teeth. So Mr. World gives Shadow the opportunity to hit Technical Boy back. He refuses, and then the new god begrudgingly issues Wednesday an offer, saying technology is evolving, we're all evolving, it would be an honor to evolve with you, I can help you influence opinions, behaviors, beliefs like never before. And media says that they want to help him find his audience, and Mr. World even insists that the war in Wednesday's mind is imaginary, and that instead of, they're proposing a merger instead. An upgrade, as Marilyn adds. A brand new lemon-scented you. Such an attractive offer. So Mr. Wednesday pushes back against Mr. World's globalism. No surprise there. And that's when media gives Mr. Wednesday a colorful, extravagant taste of what she and her fellow gods have in store. Odin's very own satellite, to be launched over North Korea next month. Just imagine lightning raining down from the sky in the form of precision-guided missiles. Can you imagine 24.9 million people? They will know your name. Lickety-kite. I had to write down that whole line because it's just so juicy and good. So it's all about rebranding from the new god's perspective. A place in tomorrow, current and lasting, as Mr. World says. And then Marilyn Monroe adds, Valhalla anew. Doesn't that sound swell? You got the friggin' rainbows and unicorns and the whole manipulative, god-awful shebang. It's parading across the four walls around them, basically forming this infomercial prison. So once their whole spiel is over, Wednesday sneers and he says, you say a merger, I hear an exile, and I think that that's a wavelength that we can all get on. And Mr. World tells Wednesday that he can give the people meaning again, just as he did in the days of old. That if he partners with the New World Order, he will never suffer the people's neglect again. But that's not exactly how Wednesday wants things to go down, and we still don't fully understand everything that's happening, but we can see that in the contention we're more inclined to side with the old gods, and there's a lot of cool gods that we have yet to meet that are only going to probably reinforce that for a lot of us, although I think media is dazzlingly awesome. So anyways, Mr. World is ready to leave Wednesday with his golden opportunity, but Technical Boy is not having it. He has neither patience nor respect for his elder god, and his impudence and naivete costs him a couple of teeth thanks to a kick-ass kiss blown from Marilyn. Such a fabulous repurposing of this iconic figure from history. And Shadow is understandably bewildered as the pearly whites come clattering onto the interrogation room table, freshly dislodged from the mouth of a guy who just received a spectacularly shitty performance review, going from burgeoning entrepreneur to impotent scapegoat. And Mr. World says of that, this is my gift to you. And media then drops the baby doll voice and really flatly, menacingly says, we're gonna tell your story, Shadow. We can tell it however you like or don't like. The narrative is theirs for the taking, and that's pretty much modern media for you in a nutshell. And so before he leaves, Mr. World whispers, I'm not your enemy. And what does every friggin' textbook enemy say? Well, basically that. So Shadow then partakes in one of his favorite hobbies of late and questions his reality again. You know, asking like, is this the reprogramming of reality? What is going on here? Did that happen? Yeah, according to Mr. Wednesday, it happened and it's still happening. So when the two escape, they come to find a horrifyingly bloody tableau with which the new gods can spin whatever tall tale they please. So they are left completely at the mercy of media and companies' representation. And then we see the wood of the chair holding the dead detective who was interrogating Shadow. It sprouts this shifting eyeball. And then as the cops try to bring in Mad Sweeney, Shadow's attacked by this freaking tree creature. And now initially I thought that this was the tree from his dreams, but I guess it could be another entity entirely. Is this actually somebody from the book that I've completely forgotten? Because I think that we're kind of off the book in this scene. But anyways, Sweeney, Shadow, and Wednesday all take their respective leaves of absence from the gruesome scene, fleeing as fugitives from justice, quote unquote. And then Laura busts into the morgue, cold as ice, but still hot on Shadow's trail. She is not done with him yet, nor is life done with her. So that is this crazy episode in a nutshell. We got a lot of media / Gillian Anderson action. Crispin Glover is such a welcome addition to the cast. I will say my one grievance with this brilliant, spectacular show is that it's a little bit tough to keep up with sometimes because, again, the dialogue is so dense, and there's a lot of really rich subtext to be read into in Neil Gaiman's novel as well. But when the lines are delivered as quickly as you normally speak, it can be kind of hard to keep up with stuff. So there was a couple times I had to kind of go back and rewatch things, try to make sure that I wasn't missing any key details, but it's still a good exercise, and I love television that demands that level of attention to detail it makes understanding everything and putting all the pieces together that much more pleasurable, because you feel like you really had to give of yourself to get there. So what are you guys thinking so far? Are you tracking? Are you lost? Are you as excited as I am? I hope that that's the case. And I will be back with the next episode next week. I'm so sorry that I missed my Better Call Saul review last week. I am in the process of getting ready to move, so things are kind of bonkers here. But I might even talk a little bit about Twin Peaks during the hiatus this week. So more stuff to come. I love you guys so much. Thanks for watching. You guys take care. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.